Let's look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah!
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. Now, yesterday, of course, we continued the mock offseason with the re-signings, and the day before that, we did the coaching changes. But with those things being out of the way, with Deuce Staley being the Lions' new offensive coordinator, with the re-signings of Jalen Reeves-Maybin, Alex Anzalone, Charles Harris, Tracy Walker, and many, many more, we can now move on to the fun parts of the mock offseason, and that is the free agency class. Now, last time we did this, I went a little bit more under the radar. I didn't want to spend a lot of money, didn't want a lot of big name guys, but the Lions do have a significant amount of cap space and do have a really, really good amount of money to spend in free agency, especially when you consider the fact that if the Lions again release Trey Flowers before after the June 1st deadline and after the new league year begins, they will free up another $17 million. They have nearly $60 million in cap space with that Trey Flowers trade or release. And with that being the case, the Lions have enough money to go out and spend on some bigger named free agents and some guys that can have some more major impacts on the team versus being more role players behind the scenes or just, guys that you have in the building just to eat up some time before you draft the guys that you actually want on this roster. With the money and the capital that they have an opportunity to go get a number 2, 3 big name or bigger name free agents at the very least that can be long-term starters and big-time impact players for this roster and for this franchise. Now, with that being said, the positions that I really, really wanted to focus on going into this free agency class was wide receiver, linebacker, safety, quarterback, in particular backup quarterback, and defensive line if there was a good prospect available. Now, unfortunately, there wasn't really a big defensive line guy that I thought would fit well with the Detroit Lions with what they wanted to do and who they wanted to replace this offseason, but I did address the remainder of those positions. Starting with the quarterback, the Lions need a new quarterback. David Blount and Tim Boyle are out the door. They didn't show enough in 2021 to warrant being around any longer, and with that being the case, the Lions had to go out and find a brand new backup quarterback. And with that being the case, they went through names like Marcus Mariota, they went through names like Kyle Allen, PJ Walker, they went through a lot of guys like Mitch Trubisky's another one that's a big name that I consider when doing this list, but I eventually ended up settling on one of the cheaper options with one of the higher upsides, and that is Dwayne Haskins, the now current Pittsburgh Steelers backup quarterback, but former Washington Redskins quarterback, and before that, obviously, the Heisman runner-up at the Ohio State. Now, Dwayne Haskins has not had a very good NFL career so far, but I think a lot of it has to do with the development that the Washington football team gave him. Washington is one of the most dysfunctional organizations in the NFL when it comes to developing players, when it comes to behind-the-scenes front office stuff. They are not a very good franchise, and their owner is not very good at developing, and their coaches were not very good at developing quarterbacks at the time. And when the coaching regime changed, when Washington discovered and found that out, Ron Rivera had no interest in developing Dwayne Haskins. He wanted a guy with a little bit more mobility and wanted a guy that fit the more modern style of quarterback in the NFL. But despite Dwayne Haskins' NFL career so far and the fact that it hasn't been the biggest success, that does not mean that Dwayne Haskins doesn't still have upside. He still has an amazing arm, has really good arm strength, is a pretty high IQ guy, at least he was at the Ohio State, and I think that if the Lions bring him in, can develop him, let him sit, don't force all this pressure onto a young kid, don't force him to be your franchise savior right away, don't even force him to start a game if you don't have to. You have him on the bench bench, you develop him. If Jared Goff goes down for a game, you let Dwayne Haskins step up and see how far he's come since his time with the Washington football team. If Jared Goff is unable to attend, if Jared Goff is unable to play a game because of injury, you bring up Dwayne Haskins and you give him an opportunity. See how far he's developed, see how far he's grown. And it's easy to say, okay, he hasn't had success in the NFL, but it's harder to look back a couple years ago at Ohio State and say he had 5,000 passing yards and 50 touchdowns in his time at Ohio State, only being a one-year starter. That is super, super impressive. He finished third in the Heisman voting for a reason. So he has talent. He has the arm strength. He has the arm talent. And yes, he's lacking in mobility, but at the same time, you don't necessarily need a mobile quarterback to be successful in the NFL. Tom Brady's not mobile. Matthew Stafford's not mobile. Jimmy Garoppolo's not mobile. I wouldn't consider Aaron Rodgers a mobile quarterback. Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes are kind of borderline. Like, they can escape, they can run the football, but they're not going to be Lamar Jackson. They're not going to be the Kyler Murrays of the world. You don't need a super athletic quarterback with 4.3 speed to be a successful team in the NFL. You look at the teams in the NFC, or you look at the teams in the NFL playoffs still. Stafford's not mobile, Jimmy G's not mobile, and of course, Joe Burrow I wouldn't really consider a mobile quarterback either. So you don't need a mobile quarterback to win. You need somebody with good IQ, good intelligence, and a good arm, and Dwayne Haskins has all of those. I think you sign him to a one-year prove-it deal, just like you signed Tim Boyle to a year ago. If he works out, you re-sign him, and if he doesn't, then you let him walk. Now, the wide receiver position is another position that I wanted to address, and I wanted to get a big-name guy. I wanted to get that true number one wide receiver that Jared Goff can lean to every single game and say, you're going to get 10, 11 targets a football game. You are going to, catch 8 to 9 of those passes a game, and you're going to have a chance to get 100 yards and a touchdown or two every single week. I want that high volume guy that gets a lot of targets, a lot of receptions, and makes the most out of them, to pair with Amon-Ra St. Brown, a guy that actually does that very same thing. It's a lot of targets, a lot of receptions, is kind of a gadget player, and just is super, super productive. So the player I went out and spent big money on this offseason was Chris Godwin, the wide receiver from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, in my opinion, Chris Godwin is the number one receiver on Tampa Bay. In my opinion, he is the most well-rounded and the best wide receiver for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, despite what the statistics may tell you. Now, Chris Godwin has really good routes, has really good hands, is just a high-effort player, and the only thing really knocking him down is the injury concerns, but he has played multiple full seasons for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, has 2 1,000-yard receiving seasons, and on his career actually totals over 4,600 yards and more than 29 touchdowns in his 5 years. Again, he's productive. He has good hands. He runs really good routes. I think this could be the guy for the Detroit Lions. He's 6'1". He, has, a pretty good size, right? Not a towering guy, not a Megatron, not a Randy Moss, not a DK Metcalf. But, you don't need a big body wide receiver to necessarily be productive. Chris Godwin is good enough sized. He's 6'1", so he's a decent size for a wide receiver. But in the NFL now, you win with routes, you win with separation, and you win with scheme. And I think Chris Godwin can complete 2 of those things: getting open, running good routes, and having good hands. He doesn't need to be a jump ball wide receiver in the end zone if he creates 3 to 4 yards of separation every single route. So he's the guy that I spent big money on. And then I addressed the wide receiver position twice this offseason, actually, by picking up Byron Pringle, the 28-year-old wide receiver from the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, Byron Pringle is a guy that you may not have heard of. Byron Pringle is buried deep down on the Kansas City depth chart, behind Tyreek Hill, behind Mecole Hardman, behind Travis Kelce, and behind a few other players here and there. He's not been a big name player, he's not been a household name in Kansas City, but he's been very productive behind the scenes, having over 500 yards and 5 touchdowns just a season ago. And actually, in 2021, when you add his receiving yardage totals and his rushing yardage totals to his kick and punt return ability, he had over 1,100 scrimmage yards and 5 touchdowns on the season a year ago. He can fill in that kick and punt return spot, and he is my primary replacement for Khalif Raymond. Khalif Raymond is a guy that was supposed to come in, be our kick and punt returner. Wasn't super effective there. Did an okay job, but wasn't super effective. Didn't really have any big returns that I can remember from a season ago. And as far as being a deep threat, didn't really have any big play touchdowns over the top to really beat the safety, get behind the defense, and score that big play touchdown. Byron Pringle has showed it multiple times with the Kansas City Chiefs this year that he can be that guy, whether it be in the red zone, whether it be as that deep threat. He can be a reliable depth wide receiver. And I think him replacing Khalif Raymond, I think he'll be more efficient. I think he'll be more productive. And I think he will just outshine whatever Khalif Raymond was going to do next season for the Detroit Lions. Now, the next player that I wanted to address was the linebacker position. And I actually, once again, addressed this twice. The first player that I looked at and the first player that I wanted to sign was Leighton Vander Esch, the linebacker from the Dallas Cowboys. Now, Leighton Vander Esch is only 25 years old, being a first-round pick in the 2018 NFL Draft, and he's been really productive over his career so far. Had a phenomenal rookie season, contended for Rookie of the Year, got injured in his sophomore campaign, and really hasn't been the same player since, but that doesn't mean he's been bad. Leighton Vander Esch has good size, really good speed, and really good instincts for an inside linebacker, and over his 4-year career so far, Leighton Vander Esch has totaled 350 tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery, 12 passes defended, and 3 interceptions. He's a really good, well-rounded football player, and I think he can be a guy that steps in and can take the role of a Jalen Rezaman, can take the role of an Alex Anzalone. He could step in and legitimately be the linebacker one. He's a captain in Dallas. He's a captain, and that could be a reason why they re-sign him, but I think Dallas has some cap issues right now with Zeke, with Cooper, with Dak taking up really a lot of cap space in just those 3, with DeMarcus Lawrence being another guy that just is a really big cap monster. They can't afford to keep everybody. Trayvon Diggs is going to have a contract coming up very soon, so they're going to want to save money for that. And I think that Leighton Vander Esch could just end up being a cap casualty for the Dallas Cowboys, and they may not want to get rid of him for his talent. They may be forced to replace him because of their cap space. And I think the Lions, with that opportunity, should jump on a real, legitimate linebacker one caliber guy. And then the other linebacker that I wanted to address today was actually Rashaan Evans, the linebacker from Tennessee. Now, Rashaan Evans, another player, another first-round pick actually from the 2018 NFL Draft. He is going to be paired with his former draft class teammates, and they are going to pair up in Detroit to be the linebackers 1 and 3. I think Alex Anzalone still sits in at that linebacker 2 spot. I think just based off what he did last year, based off his leadership, he is almost guaranteed a spot as a Detroit Lions starter next year if he wants it. But I think Rashaan Evans can be a really good linebacker 3, leaving, of course, Jalen Rezaman at the 4 and Derek Barnes at your 5. That is a super good, super young, and incredibly talented linebacking core for the Detroit Lions. Rashaan Evans is a linebacker, starting linebacker for the Tennessee Titans. Over his career, Rashaan Evans has totaled over 317 tackles, 15 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, a forced fumble, 3 fumble recoveries, 8 passes defended, and 2 interceptions. I think he's a very underrated linebacker in the NFL, and I don't think he'll be super expensive if the Tennessee Titans want to keep him. Again, I think the Titans, they don't have a great cap situation with Derrick Henry's contract, with Ryan Tannehill's contract. A.J. Brown needs to be paid. Julio Jones is being paid a lot of money, not to mention some of the other guys on their defense line and Kevin Byard in the secondary. They already, again, have some big contracts on record books, and I don't think they can afford to keep everybody. Again, I think Rashaan Evans is a cap casualty that is taken advantage of by the Detroit Lions, and they bring in a starting quality linebacker who is underrated in the NFL for maybe even not his true market value, and just a guy to come in and be really good depth and solidify a 5-strong linebacking core. Now, the next position I wanted to address was safety, and this is where the one repeated player actually comes in, and I'm going to just start off with it, get out of the way. Jabril Peppers is coming to Detroit. Jabril Peppers, his skill set, his ability as a linebacker and as a safety and as a kick and punt returner, his ability and his versatility is just too much to pass up on. Again, I mentioned that I wanted to change these up a lot, but Jabril Peppers makes just so much sense to the Detroit Lions, with Aaron Glenn being the defensive coordinator, with the Lions needing help at linebacker and at safety. They just had a lot of injury problems last year. Jabril Peppers could fill any role that they need him to play that is not nose tackle, and he can be a kick and punt returner too for you. He can fill 4 to 5 roles in one single contract, and I want to see how Aaron Glenn uses somebody of Jabril Peppers' talents to just improve this defense overall. Really quickly, Jabril Peppers had 333 tackles on his career so far, 21 tackles for loss, 4 interceptions, 25 passes defended, 4 forced fumbles, and 5 fumble recoveries. Again, he is a kick and punt return specialist as well, so that could also benefit the Detroit Lions from that aspect. And then the other safety that I wanted to address was Marcus Williams, the safety from the New Orleans Saints. Now, Marcus Williams is only 26 years old, and I would like to sign him to a 3-year contract. With Sean Payton stepping away from the coaching staff in New Orleans, with Aaron Glenn being the former secondaries coach in New Orleans, and with Dan Campbell being his former assistant head coach, it would make sense for Marcus Williams to leave. It would make sense for Marcus Williams to step away from the Saints now that his contract is up after having a really productive career in New Orleans, and go from a coaching staff that knows him to a coaching staff that knows him. He saw his most productive years under Aaron Glenn, totaling over 15 interceptions and 30 passes defended in his 4 years learning under Aaron Glenn. He had not a down year, still had 2 interceptions and was pretty good through the air this year, but had his statistically worst season as a New Orleans Saint the only year he wasn't being coached under Aaron Glenn. I think the familiarity with the coaching staff, the familiarity with the system and the scheme is a big time attraction for a player such as Marcus Williams, and I think he'll be a big money guy, but I think he might take a little bit of a discount to come and play with a guy that has coached him before, and to come play for coaches that have his best interest at heart, and come play for the coaches that he loves to play for and saw his most statistical seasons under. Now, the very, very last player that I wanted to mention is a tight end. I addressed tight end in the very last mock offseason, but this time I was looking at somebody a little different, somebody very, very underrated in the NFL, in David Njoku, the tight end from the Cleveland Browns. Now, David Njoku has been overshadowed by Austin Hooper and, other wide receivers on that Cleveland receiving group. Right, he's really the 5th, the 6th option going into next season behind Austin Hooper, Jarvis Landry, Donovan Peoples-Jones, and some other young wide receivers. Even Anthony Schwartz had more targets in certain games than David Njoku. Not to mention, they are a run-heavy team to begin with, so being the 5th option on a run-heavy team isn't very appealing to a tight end that his biggest strength is his athleticism and his receiving ability. David Njoku could be looking to move teams next season in the offseason, could not look to re-sign with the Cleveland Browns due to just the system and where he ranks in their receiving depth chart, and he could come to Detroit, be the number 2 option behind TJ Hawkinson, but at the same time really probably be the 4th option in Detroit, right behind Godwin, behind Amon-Ra St. Brown, and behind TJ Hawkins. And he'll really be the 4th, kind of splitting that time, splitting those targets with Josh Reynolds and maybe DeAndre Swift. But we are a much more pass-happy offense, or we should be a more pass-happy offense than the Cleveland Browns, giving him a lot more opportunity to catch the ball. Again, an underrated player, a guy that when he got targets, the only game this year where he had more than 6 targets, he had 7 targets for 7 receptions, 150 yards, and a touchdown. He has that big play ability. He has that receiving ability to be a top receiving tight end in the NFL. And I think pairing him with TJ Hawkinson would create mismatches all over the field. And I think it would really, really help Jared Goff just because some of those easy layup throws to build momentum early in football games and to move the chains each and every drive. But with that being said, that is all for you guys today. That is my free agency class. Again, 2 linebackers, 2 safeties, 2 wide receivers, a backup quarterback, and a backup or a role-playing tight end. I think all these players are going to have huge impacts in Detroit. I wouldn't bring somebody here just to be a depth guy. I wouldn't bring somebody here just to waste money in free agency, right? That's what the draft is for. Your depth is for the later rounds of the NFL draft. Your talent is for free agency. Your starters are supposed to come from free agency. And yes, you can get some depth guys. Byron Pringle will be a depth guy. Jabril Peppers will be a depth guy. Even David Njoku will be a depth guy. But they all play roles in this offense or in this defense, and they all play roles coming up in the 2022 season. So with all that being said, that is all for you guys today. Let me know your guys' thoughts and opinions about this free agency class. A little bit bigger, a little bit, more big names and a little bit more money spent, but the Detroit Lions absolutely had the cap space. This would not put them in a bad cap situation at all, and with the option to get rid of the Jared Goff contract as early as next season, the Lions could be really, really rolling in some money, and the cap space doesn't do you any good unless you spend it. So with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you all so very much for watching. Let me know down in the comments what you think about this free agency class and what you would change about it, what you liked about it, and just overall, how do you see free agency playing out? But with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you so very much for watching. And until next time, and as always, go Lions!